So, my current campaign is coming to an end soon. It's very sad, we've had some amazing times and I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment, but the end of one campaign means we will soon be diving into a new one, or half of one anyway, as our DM has kindly offered to run Tomb of Annihilation with us, just the Tomb part, to tide us over for a few weeks while we wait for our other DM to get ready with his own fully featured campaign. And of course, a new campaign means we need new characters, so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today just going through the process that I use for coming up with characters, and I'm going to create one in real time, or as close an approximation to real time as I can make it in what is obviously a heavily edited and pre-scripted YouTube video. Now obviously there are loads of ways that you as a player can come up with characters. There's no right or wrong way. Over the years I've seen people rock up at the table with everything from completely random characters they created from dice rolls to what I can only describe as souped up D&D versions of themselves. I've seen people create characters from their favourite movies or animes, I've seen meme characters, I've seen internet-approved min-maxed characters, I've even seen one or two pre-made characters pulled straight from the book. But whatever works for you, ultimately, go for it. You know, the game of D&D is more than big enough and deep enough to cater for all approaches, and ultimately, this game is about having fun, in whatever way that means for you. But equally, I know that I find it interesting seeing how other people come up with characters in this big crazy game of dice-directed improv that we all sink our time into, and I'm willing to bet that a few of you at home will also find this a bit interesting. So here we go. So today I'm going to create a character for you from scratch, something completely original. My original OC, do not steal. The only limitation that I'm imposing myself up front is that I know I want to create something which is entirely 100% from the newly launched 2024 edition of the game, meaning I'm going to take both my race and my subclass from the new player's handbook, as well as the spells, the features, the backgrounds, the feats, you name it. No supplementary materials here. I want to see how this new edition stands up on its own, because honestly, I haven't had a chance to really test run it yet. I also know that I want to create a female character today. Why? Well, it's been a while since I last played a female and I feel like experimenting. And for whatever reason, perhaps because it forces me to step out of my comfort zone and create something I have no first-hand experience with, or maybe it's because I'm so aware of the stereotype of some gamers occasionally creating characters of the opposite sex just to be the living embodiment of their sexual fantasies, and I'm so overtly paranoid about that same accusation being leveled at myself that I consciously veer as far away from that as possible, and in the process come up with some really crazy things. But I do tend to find that I have a bit more creative expression and license when I'm creating female characters than when I'm making men. I think that makes sense. So anyway, straight away, I'm going to start basically with the core of this character, the core concept of what I'm trying to make. Because I like my characters to be succinct. Like, I want to be able to summarize them quickly, like an elevator pitch, a one-liner that sticks in the memory. And this is important for me because, as we all know, session 0 or 1, like the first thing that we all do as a party is we introduce our characters to the others at the table. And depending on the size of your group, this can take a really long time to go around. And of course, you end up kind of forgetting what other people have done if they're doing something quite forgettable. So having an easy to grasp concept of a character, it not only helps my table to remember who I am, it helps my DM to get hold of my character quickly and start weaving them into the campaign, but ultimately it helps me when it comes to trying to personify this character at the table, if they just have a really strong basic core that I can then build out from via improv, rather than starting as this huge sprawling thing that I then have to somehow edit down. Like, as an example, I had this one player at my table who wore it as this kind of badge of pride that he would write these massive, massive backstories. You know, he came to me after our session 1 and he had this 3,000 word magnum opus that he had poured his time into. And I'll be honest, a lot of it was just kind of meandering and unedited and very unfocused. And the vast majority of it, he couldn't even keep track of himself, and so was quickly discarded, basically as soon as the first dice were rolled. Not so me. I mean, if making those sorts of long backstories is your jam, go for it. I do make long backstories myself where appropriate, but ultimately, I want to be able to summarize my character to say just a simple paragraph or a sentence, keep it simple, keep it shorthand. We're role playing here. And ultimately that then is a center that I can constantly return to if I ever kind of find myself deviating from who I'm supposed to be playing. And so to help me with this, there's basically 3 kind of core elements that I'm going to need to nail down in my head before my character is ready for the battlefield. First of all, of course, there is the character's backstory, their past, what happened to them before the game starts. Next, and leading on consequentially from the first point, is the character's appearance and personality at the start of the game, who they are now. And this is directly, of course, informed by the backstory. And on a personal note, I've always kind of really liked it when a character wears their backstory on their face, for want of a better term. Maybe they have a cool tattoo or a scar, or in the case of one character I created a while back, a missing eye. And then you're like, ooh, how did you miss your eye? That's a cool tattoo you've got there. Well, of course, it happened because of your character's backstory. And it's an easy way to kind of hook the players at the table into delving a little bit deeper into your past. And then, of course, both of these elements, the backstory and the appearance, they then in turn inform the mechanics of the character, i.e. their class, how they perform within the game itself, i.e. the character's future in this campaign. So broadly, yeah, like I say, you can think of this as the past, the present, and the future of the character. And honestly, we could start this character creation process at any one of these 3 points, since all 3 of them are informed by and in turn inform the other 2 points. All that really matters, like I said, is that the core concept is pithy, easy to understand. So I need a hook. I need something that underpins everything about this character, from their backstory to their appearance to their class. And as it so happens, I do have a couple of ideas mulling around in my head for something that I'd quite like to explore. So firstly, I've had this idea to create a character who is a chimera. So a chimera is something that exists naturally in nature and is normally seen most prevalently in the animal kingdom, but it does happen in humans as well. Now, as I understand it, and I'm no biologist here, a chimera is when a fertilized embryo splits into 2, like as if it's going to make twins, but then at a very, very early stage in the pregnancy, those twins then become reabsorbed into just one fetus, and then just one child is born rather than twins. Essentially, you are your own twin if you are a chimera. And as you can see in animals, this can be pretty striking because animals tend to have quite obvious differences in fur coloration and so on. It's less obvious in humans, however, because different eye colors and so on aside, twins tend to look pretty similar, funnily enough. But aha, of course, in D&D, this is a magical world. We can take this concept a little bit further, which could be quite fun, I think. Because, of course, in D&D, we have these 2 races of Tiefling and Aasimar, who are essentially, like, they are specifically called out as appearing at random. Like, 2 normal human beings can have a baby together, and that child might be born a Tiefling. Because of the demonic curse in the child's blood, it raises its head at random times for no real reason. Which is one of the reasons why, in a lot of D&D settings, Tieflings are so kind of shunned by society, and why Aasimar are so blessed. And so let's say that our character is a chimera. One half of their body is a normal human and the other half is a tiefling. And in the weird way of humanity, this actually makes her even more shunned than it would have been if she were just a regular tiefling, because to the tieflings, she's this freak who looks like a human, and to the humans, she's this freak who looks like a tiefling. So from this appearance of her, we can then start exploring the backstory and say, well, maybe we can say that this meant that because of who she was and how she looked, her parents decided to kind of give her up to a temple for adoption when she was very, very little. They kind of sold her to the church, as it were. And she's grown up under the protection of this temple as a kind of temple worker, nun type thing, kind of secluding herself from the rest of society. Only recently, maybe she started to do weird things, odd coincidences, bad luck, kind of like at the beginning of Harry Potter when Harry's first discovering his powers, because of course this character is her own twin, and as we all know, out of every twin, one of them is evil. That's always the case. I don't make the rules. One of every twin is always evil. And so we can say that her tiefling side actually really is demonic in some way. Or, no, actually, yeah, let's move over here now into their class. Let's say that really she's not a tiefling at all. She could actually be like a dragon blood sorcerer. And it's just people's bigotry that thought that she was a tiefling all along, when actually she was draconic, because hey, it's red, scaly skin and horns either way, right? Yeah, so that's one idea. And I do like it, but I think it might be a little bit too big for such a short adventure, because I know that this campaign we're going into, it's going to be quite a short thing. Likely it's only going to last a couple of months. And this Chimera idea, probably a bit too big to explore in full. So I'm going to park it for now. But hopefully you get the idea now. We have this very simple core concept. She is a Chimera, she is her own twin, and that informs her backstory, it informs her appearance, and it informs her class. But the other idea I'm mulling over, it's a little bit simpler and I think might be better for this campaign. This is the idea of a character that has some sort of curse. Maybe a curse that is incurable and getting worse as the campaign progresses. This will help in a number of ways. It injects this kind of ticking clock element into the character's motivations that should help to encourage them to move the story forwards, which in turn then helps with maintaining campaign momentum and keeping things on track. And as to what this curse might be, well, we come to this second point here, that being the character's appearance. Like I said, I like it when a character wears their backstory on their face, and so I want this curse to somehow show up physically on the body, making her stand out, reinforcing that ticking clock again, because with every level up, I can then report to the table how the curse is progressing and getting worse. Bit of body horror there. So, to take some inspiration from real life for a second. So I came across this article a few weeks ago, which was talking about this very rare genetic condition. So rare, it only affects like 50 people in the whole world, I think, and they can all be traced back to this single family. So it's absolutely this rare mutation in the genome, carried generation to generation. And this disease, basically, someone who is afflicted by this, they don't know. They're going to be just happily living their best lives, going about their day, nothing wrong with them whatsoever. But then one day, all of a sudden, they lose the ability to fall asleep. And at first, maybe they don't even realize that anything is wrong. They're a little bit irritable, maybe a little bit forgetful. But over time, it gets worse and worse and worse until the point where maybe even with the help of sedatives and meditation, they are completely unable to obtain real REM sleep by any means. There was actually one anecdote I read of this patient who by the end was using medical grade anesthetics and was still unable to lose consciousness. You can just imagine how bad that must be for the patient. Like, they're quickly losing their faculties, entering this kind of psychosis, form of dementia even, where they're just unable to distinguish dream from reality, hallucinations, hysteria, and finally after about 10 to 12 months, death. Honestly, I can't imagine a more horrible way to die than that. I've pulled all-nighters back in the day. I know how bad you feel after just one night of missed sleep. To go 10 to 12 months without sleeping, without being able to sleep despite desperately wanting to, pure torture right there. And yeah, that's something that this family has to constantly worry about. Like, everyone within this family, they're constantly looking over their shoulders, constantly worrying if they miss a night's sleep by accident. Oh, has this condition come for me? Will I too lose this ability to one day fall asleep and then go insane? So I'm thinking of having a similar curse in this game. Not a sleep-related one though. I mean, I very much do not want to go down the route of amassing points of exhaustion in this game, thank you very much. So no, instead I need, well, I mean, this is D&D, so it's some magically inflicted curse, and it's not going to manifest in every single member of the family. So maybe this character that we're creating, she's already seen her uncle going through this curse firsthand. She saw him get worse and worse and die. Maybe she has memories of her great-grandfather suffering it as well. Like, not everyone in the family suffers from it, but now she too is starting to show signs of this sickness, and maybe this is why she's actually here we go, we're actually into the backstory part now. This is why she has decided to remove herself from her family at the start of the game and set off on an adventure, because I don't know, like maybe she has a younger sister or a younger brother and she doesn't want her family to see her go through this disease up close like she witnessed her uncle going through it. That makes sense. She doesn't want her family to see her decline. She doesn't want to be a burden on them. But at the same time, maybe she's heard these whispers that maybe there might be a cure out there, or maybe the wizard that cursed them all those years ago is hiding in this far-off place, and that far-off place, it just so happens to be inside the Tomb of Annihilation. And so she's kind of doing this Hail Mary, tossing the dice, taking fate into her hands that maybe, just maybe, she can find this cure for herself and her family before it's too late. Or at the very least, die having explored a bit of the world, helped some people, found some cool treasure, all that bucket list stuff. As for what the curse is, well, this is where I turn to the player's handbook, and I've been looking through it for a while, and I see here this entry for Goliaths, which have undergone a little bit of a glow up since the previous edition. They really have. They are now more explicitly descendants of giants than they were before. They seem much more elemental in nature, almost like Genasi, to be honest. Like you've got fire, frost, stone, and you know, I've never played a Goliath in a campaign before, so I think it might be interesting. And so I'm looking at the options here, and I'm immediately drawn here to Stone Goliath, who can reduce damage as a reaction. Why might they be able to do that, I ask? Well, presumably it's because their skin is tough as stone, and that's why they're able to reduce damage. And that got me thinking, hey, actually, maybe this is the curse that our character is afflicted with. Our character, let's say that she is slowly but surely turning to stone. Maybe her uncle, he literally turned into a statue before her eyes a while ago, and she knows that one day in the next 10 to 12 months, she too will succumb to the same fate. And hey, let's make it a little bit grimdark here. Let's say it's a living statue. Her uncle is still alive. He is trapped inside this immutable stone, unable to be healed even by powerful clerics, aware of everything going on around him, unable to move, to speak, to interact. Yeah, that's pretty metal. Like, I'm picturing in my head right now this image. You know, like how the ground looks when it hasn't rained for a very long time and it's all kind of cracked and broken, or like chipped pottery or something. I'm imagining this character having skin that looks a lot like this, and presumably she's like desperately trying to hold back the progression of this curse as the best she can. So I'm imagining her like every morning slathering herself in ointments and salves and moisturizing lotions, wrapping herself in bandages to hide her skin from the elements and keep it moist. I imagine her constantly kind of flexing her body, like pricking the ends of her fingers with a blade to prove that she can still feel things, stretching, moving herself to keep herself limber, trying to prove to herself that yes, she can still move, she isn't a statue yet. And this in turn, as I'm talking, I realize that this is now informing the class, and she is going to be a monk. Makes sense. Monks are all about stretching and yoga poses and martial arts. Needs to stay dexterous. And of course, as a monk, you get unarmed defense, and hey, so she has now an in-game reason as to why her AC is high. Despite being unarmored, her skin is partially made of stone. This stacks with the Goliath trait. It makes sense why her fists hit really hard and all these other things. It all fits together. Yeah, I like it. I also like it because it means that this character isn't going to be very reliant on inventory to be affected. Like, she doesn't need any weapon other than her fists, and she doesn't need any armor. And from what I've heard about the Tomb of Annihilation campaign, well, I know this is a little bit metagamey to say, but I believe it's the sort of campaign where it helps if you are able to be at least a little bit self-sufficient. So at this point, I'm tempted to just dive right now into D&D Beyond and start building her. But first, I do like to get some visuals down, just so I can kind of test if what's going on in my head really works in reality. And it also helps me to nail down some elements of her personality and her portrayal when I'm role-playing her at the table. So yes, This does mean I'm now going to be using AI to generate images, and yes, I do know that a lot of people watching this video have some very strong opinions about AI image generation. So let me just state up front, without getting too into the weeds here, if you have a visceral hatred towards computer-generated imagery, I get it. God knows there are some really scary implementations in its use right now. Everything from deep fakes and stealing identities, messing with history and our ability to tell what's true, to the more sleazy side where people are trying to sell this slop as actual art by kind of slapping it onto a t-shirt or a mug, or using it to pass exams, or as was the case with the Junior Eurovision Song Contest last year, using AI to morph pictures of actual children who are participating in the contest without their parents' consent, mind you, which of course involved uploading images of those children to the AI model, so it now has those images that it can use as training data and use for future AI images. And all of this despite, of course, the team involved having a multimedia marketing budget in the literal tens of millions of dollars. But let's be real now, I'm not doing that here. I'm just making an image for a quick, fun exercise for my D&D group. The value of this image is precisely zero. It is worthless. I'm not trying to make a profit from it. There is no intellectual copyright here. So hopefully that helps to clear things up a bit. I tend to view AI as a bit of a tool at the end of the day. It's no different to using watercolors or a camera or Photoshop, and whether or not I choose to use that tool, it's not going to stop that tool from existing. So as long as I use it ethically and within the bounds of what is right and wrong, and I'm not using it for profit, I think it's fair to use it. And so now at this final point, we have nothing left but to actually create the character. So let's head on over into D&D Beyond, and yeah, I don't think I've ever actually made a character with everything turned off here before. This is lovely. So obviously, like I've said, she's a monk level 1. For proficiencies, well, obviously we're not going with history or insight for the reason I just mentioned. She's a fish out of water. Stealth, maybe, because she's trying to hide herself away from others because she's self-conscious. And as much as I would like to choose acrobatics, yeah, it's going to have to be athletics, isn't it? Like, she's turning to stone here. For tool proficiencies, we're going to say alchemist supplies. That's maybe what she uses every day to make all of those salves and the ointments that she's using to try and hold back the curse. Interesting, I can't give her a proficiency in medicine here, but I think at some point, if I can, I probably should find a way to do that because, yeah, absolutely, she's been studying medicine. Like we said before, for a race, she's going to be Goliath. Although maybe, you know what, in her mind, maybe she thinks she's a human. I think that could be fun. Like if she doesn't know that her family are Goliaths. Yeah, and of course we're going to go with Stone Giant. And by the way, just look at the fire version here. My gosh, easily the most overpowered one if you're going for min-max. Languages, well, Giant, of course, we can say it's her family's language. And Dwarvish, why not? Let's say she wanted to learn more about stone and rocks, so she took an evening class in Dwarvish to find out if they could help her with her curse. Spoiler alert, no, they couldn't. As a background, she's a simple girl, so let's just say farmer. The ASIs we get from that are going to be wisdom and constitution, as this will then boost her unarmored defense. It also gives her the tough feat for free, which, yeah, is very on point. She would be quite tough. She's turning to stone. For stats, I'm going to roll this time, and I actually roll really well. So I'm going to lay out the stats in a pretty optimized way. No surprises here, with charisma as my dump stat. For equipment, I think I'm going to take the money here. I don't really like any of this starting equipment, and I'm going to spend it on a few things. Quarterstaff, bedroll, rations. She gets a healer's kit for free because of her background, but I'm also going to spend money to buy her a herbalism kit, even though she can't use it, and alchemist supplies. It is pretty expensive, but you know, she has the proficiency in it. It's how she makes all of those ointments for herself. And finally, we need a name. So you can see that during this character creation process, I've been trying out the name Jade. I'm not really sure if I like it though. I was thinking of kind of going for this stone themed name for her. Like we could say everyone in her family has a stone themed name. It's, I don't know, it's gallows humor. It's their way of naming children. Let's look up some popular stones, shall we? Okay, yeah, so citrine. Yeah, her sister can be citrine. Her mother could be jade, let's say that. The uncle could be malachite. Other people in the family, we could have tourmaline, we could have jasper. Yeah, that's cool. And she, well, I mean, I quite like garnet, but I know that that's just going to make my group start making Steven Universe references for hours, so yeah, let's avoid that. And instead, I'm going to go with jacinth. Jacinth the month. Created in all of, 20 minutes there, from a simple core elevator pitch of a concept and working outwards via her appearance, her backstory, and her class, all of which are informed by and build upon the other two elements. Pretty cool, I think, and certainly going to be a lot of fun on the battlefield, even if it's just for a mini campaign. Talking of which, this whole process has helped me to kind of think about how I'm going to roleplay her. I think I'm going to make her, well, I already mentioned her as being a bit self-conscious, like chip on her shoulder, because she's kind of worried that people are kind of laughing behind her back, keeping herself to herself. You know, she's constantly worried and paranoid because she's turning to stone. But at the same time, I think this is her first time traveling. So I think she's a bit of a fish out of water. She's a bit naive about the ways of the world. But overall, she has a good heart and she does want to help others. She wants to help her family to overcome this curse. And yeah, I think I realize as I'm saying this, I'm just describing a typical tsundere type. But yeah, I guess that's what she is. She's a tsundere. And yeah, I like it because hopefully from this I've now set things up so that my DM is in a good place to run this character in a campaign. Not only does she have a clear goal for why she's adventuring to find a cure, I've got a bunch of NPCs that my DM can then dive into if they want to, like the uncle, the younger sister. I can create others, and I've also given the DM a clear dangling plot thread, a mystery that they are now free to play with if they want to, namely, what is this curse? Where did it come from? How, if at all, can it be cured? Now, I don't know the answer to any of these questions. All I know is that my character is slowly turning to stone, and it's now up to the DM to fill in the gaps. And this is important, by the way, as kind of general guidance. I think this is a good rule of thumb, because it always seems to work best for me in campaigns. And the best characters always seem to be the ones where they have deliberately left gaps in the backstory. Like, just to show the opposite here, like I've seen characters in the past where their backstory is like this closed circle, essentially. It's something like, when my character was 15, this dragon appeared out of nowhere and it killed all of my family and all of my friends and it burned down my entire town, and so my character swore revenge and he went out and he got really strong, and then one day he managed to bring down the dragon in single combat, and on that day he swore to go out evermore fighting evil in the world and restoring justice so that no one would ever have to suffer like he had. The end. And as a DM, I'm looking at it and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, one, you're level 1 at the start of this campaign. You ain't killing no dragons single-handed, let me tell you that. But also, I've got no living NPCs here. All your family and friends are dead. Your town is destroyed. Like, there's nothing here for me to work with. Even your arch nemesis, this dragon, is dead. What do I build on here? Your backstory's eaten itself in this Ouroborean cycle of narrative fulfillment. So yeah, make life easy for your DM. Give them unanswered questions, give them unfinished business, give them something they can latch onto when making your adventures. They will thank you for it, believe me. And just to tie things in a nice bow, I think I'm now going to just spend a moment just to jump over into Hero Forge here and have a go at creating her mini so I could use her on the battlefield if I wanted to. And yeah, after playing around for a bit, here she is. Looking a little bit too much like Vi from Arcane here, thanks to this jacket of hers, but yeah, Hero Forge doesn't always have the best options, and without the jacket, she looks a bit weird. Plus, of course, her skin doesn't have the stone texture here. I'm going to have to figure out a way to paint that. That's for a future me to worry about. But anyway, yeah, as always, I've pasted a link to her character sheet and her AI created character art in the description of this video. Check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, if you have watched this to the end, thank you so much. Please do give the video a like and comment below. How do you go about making characters? Is your approach similar to mine? Do you start with a character sheet and work backwards? Do you create something similar to what already exists and tweak from there? Honestly, I would love to hear it. But in the meantime, I hope you have a really wonderful week, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care.